The following featured presentation is part of the Skywalking Network.
Welcome to Star Warsologies, the podcast about science and other academic fields of studies seen in Star Wars. I'm Melissa Miller, and I am the science and technology writer for Nerdist. This episode includes our panel from Comic-Con 2022, The Science of Jurassic World. And as you may have realized from the name, it has nothing to do with Star Wars whatsoever. We're going a little outside of the scope of the podcast, but still has that same energy and fun.
And I'm James Floyd, your other co-host. I am a freelance writer for Star Wars Insider print magazine and StarWars.com. I'm really excited for this panel I did, and let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Science of Jurassic World. Da 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 da. As per usual in a Jurassic Park, we're having some sort of technical issue. The electrified fences are down, and it's killed my laptop. Little pictures of Dennis Nedry are picking up on my screen here. So we're going to get started anyway. I'd like to introduce myself. I am James Floyd. I am a writer for StarWars.com and Star Wars Insider magazine and host of a podcast called Star Warsologies. You might notice a theme there. Star Warsologies, we talk about science and Star Wars in different ways, but we're branching out right now, doing some Jurassic Park stuff, because who doesn't like dinosaurs? Yeah, if you don't like dinosaurs, you're definitely in the wrong place. So, you're giving out money?
No, it means out.
Oh, out. Okay, I thought you were just like dollar bills. Okay, anyway, we're going to go down the line and introduce ourselves. We're going to start at, we'll start at this end.
Okay. Hi, my name is Stuart Sumida, and I'm a professor of biology at Cal State San Bernardino. I worked a little, not a lot, a little on Jurassic World Dominion and a lot on Camp Cretaceous. And I'm with DreamWorks, and I teach anatomy at film studios. The first film I worked on was Beauty and the Beast, a long time ago, and up until today. So.
Hi, my name's Sam Wynns. I'm a conservation biologist with the National Park Service here in town at Cabrillo National Monument. I'm also an If-Then ambassador, one of 125 women in STEM chosen by AAAS to be a high-profile role model for young girls.
Hi, my name is Earyn McGee. I'm a herpetologist, so someone who studies reptiles and amphibians, and I also teach people about lizards on social media through a game that I run called #FindThatLizard, and I'm also an If-Then ambassador.
Hi. Wow, that's a lot of nerds. They do travel in herds. My name is Gabriel Santos. I am a vertebrate paleontologist. I actually studied marine mammal evolution, but the reason I get to help be up here is because I actually focus now on science education at my museum, the Alf Museum of Paleontology. I am the director of education at the Alf Museum, and I'm also the co-founder of the Cosplay for Science initiative, talking about science through science fiction and cosplay. And I'm currently a Grosvenor Teacher Fellow, one of 50 teachers in the United States who are working to develop science storytelling.
Yeah. So we have a group here of some fantastic scientists, and we're going to just dive in. One of the first things that we get into with the Jurassic Park series is, where do they find the DNA? And they pull that out of amber. Did anyone want to tackle about getting DNA and amber specifically?
Stuart.
So,
All you, Stuart.
there are lots of fossils where we find animals that are actually entrapped in amber. And the contention of the film is that mosquitoes that might have dipped their proboscis into dinosaurs sometime back in the Mesozoic was able to get some of the blood out of the dinosaur, and therefore we might have some of the DNA within some of the blood cells. That is the contention of the film. Now we know we're not making documentaries. Are fossils preserved in amber? Yes. Is some biological material preserved in some of those fossils? Possibly yes. Definitely skeletal material, definitely skin material, integument, things like hair and feathers and so on. Is blood preserved? Well, probably not. But that being said, there are some workers, and Gabe can attest to this as well, at a variety of institutions in the paleontological community that have suggested that they can get biomolecules out of fossils. Some people have suggested they can get biomolecules including proteins, and so can we get DNA? Well, we do get DNA from fossils, not as old as dinosaurs.
But maybe we just don't have the technology yet.
So the answer is there are a lot of things that we can't do now, but maybe someday.
Someday. So if you're missing the DNA from dinosaurs in this, would you have to issue an Amber Alert?
Wow.
I only get one. And then the next step, of course, is taking that DNA and turning it into a full-stranded DNA. We know in the films, they start off using frog DNA, and then later on in Dominion, they talk about using bird DNA, and then in Jurassic World and Fallen Kingdom, they talk about bringing in other things and starting to mix things. And when they make the Indominus Rex, they're adding things like cuttlefish and viper. And can we do that? Should we do that? No. Bigger, more teeth, right?
I mean, I think those are two different questions. There is, actual ways that we can splice DNA. Like, that's how you get glowing animals, by combining with jellyfish, right? And so bioluminescence can do that. But should we? I think that depends on who you're talking to. Like, for me, it depends on what research we're going and how the ethics play out in that.
So this is a very hot issue, as you can tell. We make genetically modified organisms all the time in a lab.
Indeed.
You guys use modern medicine at all? Then you've used the resources of genetically modified organisms, right? Because we do it with like bacteria and yeast and mice and flies and all of those model organisms in a lab so that we can study them and see what works in their genes, what genes do. So that, question of like, should we? Well, I mean, we have golden rice, which feeds people and gives them all of the nutrients they need that they were lacking, right?
Yeah.
That are genetically modified. So I think the question is, when do you stop?
Yeah.
Right? And you're right, the ethics, the bioethics behind it. When do you stop? Like, maybe what is the purpose that you're doing it for? Maybe that comes into play, but it's not a very cut and dry answer, right? Like
I know
many
that
answers.
I wouldn't stop until I have giant locusts that will eat normal crops, but leave my bioengineered crops alone, because then I'll become rich.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no,
Oh,
that's yes, right here we have the biosyn engineers.
Yeah.
I'm glad you stopped burning. That's good.
Yeah.
There will be Dominion spoilers if you haven't noticed.
One of the things that's very, very interesting, though, is that you can do all sorts of criticisms if you want. You can nitpick and so on and so forth. But how many people remember Mr. DNA? Okay, Mr. DNA is great. Okay, and that was, by the way, give credit where credit is due. That was done by a gentleman named Bob Kurtz, and Bob Kurtz is an amazing animator, by the way, and he's very, very clever. And if you look at that Mr. DNA, it still stands up. Actually, I use it to teach all the time. One of the things that people forget is that when that was done in the first Jurassic Park film, that was science fiction. Okay? Now we have something called CRISPR technology, where you can splice genes into other things. We do it to try and deal with genetic diseases. We do it for as you just heard, coming up with crops that can feed more people, or perhaps survive on less water. Thank you. Welcome to California, right? So, in fact, You can criticize a lot of things about these films, but in some cases, they've actually been very prescient and predicted the future in some ways.
And I think, for me, I think, if you're an audience member and you're watching this kind of movie and that's your first exposure to molecular, biology, genetics, and things like that, and that's what you believe, that's totally okay. Our job here is to help connect those dots for you and show you like how cool science is even in the real world. I keep saying today is like some of the things in science is so much more cool and amazing and wondrous than you could ever see in science fiction. You just gotta find those connections out there for you, like us.
Science is like magic, but real.
There's a great line, I can't remember the author, it said that anything technology sufficiently advanced beyond my own appears as magic, right?
Yep. I think that was Arthur Clarke.
Right. So if you held up an iPhone to somebody 30 years ago, they would think you were a witch. Okay. But it is remarkable, and it's so exciting. I can tell you that teaching as long as we have, the people up at this table, what we've seen happen in the last 5, 10, 20 years is stunning and exciting. It's insane. So.
In herpetology, do they have like molecular biology and genetics helped make a lot of discoveries in herpetology recently?
Recently?
Or like over time?
Okay,
Yeah.
so, well, over time, then yes. It's actually like really surprising. And so one of my favorite lizard facts actually is that there's the Gila monster is the only venomous lizard in North America. You find it mostly in Arizona and some parts of Nevada, but scientists have taken a compound out of its saliva to create a medicine for diabetes. And that's like one of my favorite things to tell people about lizards, because they're like, oh, why do you need to study them? And it's like, one, they're just cool on their own, but also they have all these different implications for helping people.
And remember, herpetology is a study of reptiles and amphibians, and dinosaurs are reptiles, okay? So if you like dinosaurs, you're a herpetologist. I'm just saying.
And diving a little more into that with the amphibians, is frog DNA a good idea to use, or any other type of DNA where we're filling in those gaps? Any thoughts on what type of DNA we should use to fill in those gaps?
I'm not sure about what kind we should use, but we definitely shouldn't use frogs.
So amphibians are actually not very closely related to reptiles at all.
Yeah, they're pretty far apart.
I mean, we have dinosaurs alive today.
Yeah.
Birds are dinosaurs, So if you eat chicken nuggets, you eat dinosaur, I'm just saying. But like, they could have gone that route if we're, it's science fiction, whatever sometimes. But if we were something more plausible, going with a bird is just like, I'm taking DNA from a dino and putting in another dino.
So we should use chickens instead.
Or gators.
Yeah.
Because, the more primitive relatives of dinosaurs are pterosaurs and crocodilomorphs. And crocodilians are still alive today. They've been around since as long as the dinosaurs have. As Gabe said, choose either a bird on one end, or I would choose a croc on the other.
Either way, they probably taste delicious.
Ooh, Kentucky Fried Raptor. It's a new food source. No, it's a lot cheaper probably to make giant locusts, and they're like all protein.
Pretty much,
Yeah. I have some in my fridge right now. So.
Looking at putting the DNA together, then the next step is jumping from DNA to really some sort of viable organism just to start as a cell. Any thoughts about how we could do that? Is that possible? Are we already doing it? Like cloning, essentially, and moving from DNA to something bigger. I know our microbiologists and cellular biologists can't be here today, unfortunately. Claire Metters and J. Diane Dodson, though, they'd be all over this. So we're just going to think about it for a while and then move on?
Well, but as Sam said, one of the things that is going on is that there are all sorts of genetically modified organisms already. And we use tools that you might not realize. So for instance, the flu vaccine is built on chicken eggs and so on and so forth. You know, we don't use chickens to do it, but we use the eggs to help grow the stuff that's going to give us the vaccine, for example. And so can we do it? Well, you know what? 10 years ago, we wouldn't have thought what we could do with CRISPR. I wouldn't use frog DNA. But what we can do is increasing by leaps and bounds. So I would say probably not today, but can we come up with some things that are some of the primitive features? Okay, birds are derived from dinosaurs, so they share a lot of genes with presumably dinosaurs. We share a lot of genes with flies, for goodness sakes. Okay? A lot of the basic things that keep us alive are basic physiology for day-to-day biochemical life. So can we find ways to isolate some of those other things?
Possibly.
Possibly. Can we probably build an entire dinosaur? Probably not. But can we actually investigate some of the genetic components that birds and dinosaurs share? Probably.
Yeah, you're actually touching on a point that I think about a lot with these movies, is that, you know, when you genetically modify an organism, you need to actually understand the genetics behind that organism pretty well already, right? Because you want to make sure you're not knocking out a gene, right, or altering a gene in some way that is crucial to their function, right? And you have to understand like what you're putting in, what genetic sequence you're putting in, right? Using CRISPR. And so this is the pickle. Like we can look at dinosaurs, right, and use them as a template, birds, and use them as a template for dinosaurs. But there's going to be a lot of genes that dinosaurs have that birds do not necessarily.
Or they've been turned off, or
they've been turned off, or there's mutations, right, that we don't understand because they've been gone for so long, truly.
Maybe something that inhibits feathers, which is why most of the dinosaurs in the Jurassic movies don't have feathers when they should.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for touching on that, by the way. Can I just say, so like one of my areas of expertise are birds, and it made me so angry that they just kept coming out with no feathered dinosaurs. And so this latest one, I squealed with delight when there were feathers. I was so pleased.
I was relieved.
Yeah, something? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add to your point further before of that genes that birds might have today might impact whatever it is you're trying to splice with, whatever dinosaur DNA that you have, and that also could impact whether or not you see the desired results from doing whatever experiment.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like Legos, you know.
I'm sorry, I was just thinking about the really cool Lego set with the T-Rex and the upside down Ford Explorer and stuff. But something that we kind of touched on a little bit is, you know, splicing in stuff, and, you know, it grows into an organism. And one of the things that, you know, we learned from Jurassic Park is they started with an all-female population. Life found a way. Things turned out differently. How is that possible? You know, is it a frog thing? But I think it's also a lizard thing, right?
It's
fish thing too, and a snake thing,
and a snake thing, and a fish thing.
Yeah, there's I'm blanking on the zoo now, but there was actually recently a lizard, I believe, that laid eggs and self-fertilized the eggs, and that lizard was not supposed to be able to do that. And so it's a very rare thing to happen, but it is possible. And so that's something that, if in Jurassic Park, is something that could potentially happen, where these animals are out here reproducing on their own. And it's actually called like parthenogenesis, and there are some lizards that exist today that can do it. So like out here in the Southwest, we have whiptail lizards, and so some of them can reproduce asexually, so they don't need any mates. So there's just whole populations of these lizards that are entirely female, and they're just making clones of themselves. And it's really cool how this happens. It's one whiptail species breeds with another species, and they create this hybrid, and that hybrid is able to reproduce asexually just from that one generation. So it's not that hard for that to happen.
Because life finds a way, James.
And life finds a way, and apparently we don't need humans to do it. That you know, the lizards have figured out how to do it themselves. They're going to make their own Jurassic Park with some other DNA they can put together themselves.
Are we holding all questions to the end because we have a question?
No, we will hold questions to the end. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Condor.
you're absolutely right. A
Oh.
California condor actually recently, there was parthenogenesis, and a paper was just published on that.
Wow.
San Diego Zoo Global was reporting on it as well.
Is that, you think something like an environmental factor that's triggering this, or just random mutation, or?
This I don't know, actually, and I read the paper briefly, but I was not one of the scientists that worked on it, so I need to look at it more in depth. Sorry, wasn't ready to field that question, but yeah, it's true. I mean, it's pretty amazing. It is an evolutionary trait.
Yeah, and then and like lizards and snakes, they're still trying to figure it out. Like they're not quite sure when it's not supposed to happen. Not for like the whiptails that do it on their own, but like when it's not supposed to happen, still not clear on what those processes are that leads to that spontaneous parthenogenesis.
Right, whatever the mechanism is. Oftentimes, it could be environmental factors.
Yeah.
That leads to that.
Which made the zoo incident even more surprising because it's like, what in this environment allowed this to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And the Jurassic Park is a big zoo, so again they're creating things that are less dinosaur and more monster, as Henry Wu put it later on. But at the same time, it's that they are in some sort of captivity. They have different things that they have to follow. But as they grow, what are some of those behaviors that maybe they might exhibit that we would think of as natural, or we would think of as something because they're in captivity?
Can you say the question one more time?
Oh,
Sorry.
dinosaur behavior. Go for it.
Well, okay, most of the paleontologists who are looking for some kind of smoking gun behavior in the fossil record usually look for a very unusual fossil doing, caught in the act of doing something very unusual. They're very, very rare. That being said, the same strategy that Gabe mentioned is one of the strategies we use. We look at animals that are closely related, and we look at animals that are both more primitive and more derived. This is called the phylogenetic bracket approach. If you see something going on in things that are more primitive and things that are more derived, it is likely that the stuff in between was probably similar. Okay, that's the most simple explanation. That's not necessarily the case, but it is likely the case. And we do see, for example, things like parental care in crocodilians. And we see all sorts of kinds of examples of parental care in birds. We see vocal communication in crocodilians, and we see, of course, extremely sophisticated vocal communication in birds. So could dinosaurs have done some of those things? Quite possibly, yes. It's biologically reasonable. Okay.
So there's a recent fossil, actually, that maybe you can speak to, Gabe, of evidence of parental care of dinosaurs sitting on nests. There's been a couple of them, actually, of a very specific species of dinosaurs. So
Yeah.
That's a really sad fossil when you think about it.
It's a sad
Yeah.
fossil for sure, but it's also an amazing thing. And if you've ever heard of like oviraptor from Mongolia, they've been found on top of their nests, and these are amazing, rare snapshots of time where the mother or the parental dinosaur was found fossilized on top of its nest, and that's really, really amazing evidence that suggests direct parental care of these dinosaurs. And things like that, again, really, really rare instance of a snapshot in time, but it's right there in front of us. And as we continue to excavate in more places where we have not done as much research, hopefully we'll find more. I mean, some of the first dinosaur eggs weren't discovered until we went back into Mongolia and China with Roy Chapman Andrews in the 1920s, I believe, right? Yeah, and so before that, we had no idea how dinosaurs popped out.
And so the feather story, of course, is really, really important, right? Birds have feathers, but now we know dinosaurs did as well. Okay? And one of the things about that fossil that's remarkable is that the arms are wrapped around the eggs. And we have found oviraptor fossils with feathers on their arms. So the original function of feathers could not have been for flight. These animals were too big to have flown, but why did they have feathers? There are many possible hypotheses, but one of the hypotheses was egg incubation. Right? So, and when you have something that you can cover it with, You can either shade it when it's too hot, or you can keep it warm when it's too cold. So that is one of the possible ideas for why feathers are found in dinosaurs
And
prior
then
to birds.
Then they've found an added bonus. Like, if we get lighter, we can use these feathers for flying. Except you, penguin.
I think that's my favorite part about paleontology, really, is, as paleontologists, we're looking at bits and pieces and chapters of the ancient past, and we're only looking at, broken, frayed pages in these chapters. And every time we find a new fossil, that's a page added to this story of life on Earth. And constantly we're finding brand new pages, and it's an amazing feeling to see the story of life on Earth fill in before us. And every day I wake up on my Twitter and scrolling through, and I see someone I know or someone just published something cool that just really fills in our understanding of all the billions of years that led to us here today. It's such a cool experience. As a paleontologist, evolutionary biologist, it's really one of my favorite things to geek out about.
And one of the cool things with the oviraptors, that we see the eggs, we see the parent, but then we see the whole range in the fossils of going from newborn to juvenile to adult. And so we have a chance to study juveniles, and I was going to ask Dinosaur Joe down there about what Joe has been doing and how a juvenile Parasaurolophus.
Okay, people tell me I say it wrong. I say Parasaurolophus, you could say Parasaurolophus. Honestly, if you say it with a lot of gusto, no one's going to tell you you're wrong. So everyone say hi to Joe. So Dinosaur Joe is actually really cool. He is a reconstruction of the most complete baby Parasaurolophus ever discovered. It was discovered at my museum, at the ALF Museum. And we learned so much about how dinosaurs grow up, specifically Parasaurolophus and other hadrosaurs, from this fossil. It was amazing. We were able to section, when I say we, I'm at the museum, I really didn't do anything. But they sectioned its femur, and we're able to count the growth rings on its bone to see how rapidly these baby dinosaurs grow up and develop from hatchling to 1 year old. Parasaurolophus has that long crest, right? That it uses to go, wah. But as a baby, it was much smaller, and it's more like a meh. And so it's really cool getting to understand how dinosaurs grow and change through time, from things like this, baby chasmosaurs, other kinds of discoveries of baby dinosaurs. It's, again, filling in those pages of missing time.
See, when we think about fossil animals, we have to think about them the same way we think about living ones and living populations, okay? So we just heard about, parthenogenesis, which is something the beginning of, conception, right? When we think about dinosaurs, everybody thinks of adult T-Rexes and adult Triceratopses, but remember, these are populations that included everything from babies all the way up to adults to elderly animals that died. And now, some of them may have had social interactions, some of them may not, but they all started as babies and eggs, and then they all grew up. And that's one of the areas in paleontology where there's been an enormous amount of progress, is learning about, by slicing into those bones and looking at the bones. The bones are like a history of that individual. So that is, after the discovery of feathers in dinosaurs, that's probably been one of the biggest deals in the paleontological literature, I would say, in the last 20 years. So.
There we go. Something very cool and new. You heard it here. One of the other things is, we mentioned looking back at similar species, both, the evolutionary end of birds and then back to the crocodilians. Gabe mentioned, making the sounds. Do reptiles use sound as a way to communicate with each other? Because normally you don't think of, reptiles making a lot of sounds, except for maybe crocodiles and alligators.
So yes, so not often it's not like a lot of them make noises, but some of them do make sounds. So like there's some lizards, if you squeeze on them, or if they're caught by a predator or something, they will like squeak at you, and yeah, it's really cute, but it's also kind of like, I don't want to hurt you. Right. And then snakes will make sounds at each other, but not like, roaring like lions or anything like this. These tend to be more subtle sounds, because for both snakes and lizards, their way of hiding and staying away from predators is by being inconspicuous. So of course they're not going to be super loud or super vocal, but they can incorporate sound into some of their ways of interacting with one another.
They're actually pretty good at hearing, though.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
So that's a misnomer. A lot of people think that snakes can't hear.
No, they can.
And they can. They don't have external ear holes like we do, but they hear through vibration. They do have a bone, and they can hear quite well.
And lots of reptiles and amphibians, in fact, can sense vibration extremely well, which is why it's so hard to sneak up on them. They can hear you walking towards them. Okay, and no matter how quiet you are, you have to be incredibly stealthy to actually sneak up on these animals, because their sensitivity to vibration, and hearing is a vibrational mechanical sense, is incredibly sensitive, actually.
Unless you're a bird or something that can pounce really well, and then they don't see you coming. They don't hear you coming.
Well, especially if you're an owl, right? So
Who?
owls.
Who?
You walked into that one, Stuart.
Yeah, what can I say? I love owls.
Me too.
I just completely derailed myself.
You did. Cool story, bro.
So one of the things that we learned through the Jurassic World series especially is that, you know, our world in that series has become a Jurassic World, in that the dinosaurs no longer on the island. They're now living among us in our wildlife areas as well as in our cities. How well would that work?
It would not. In short, the end of sentence. No, for a variety of reasons, actually. So first of all, wherever you're going to introduce them to, like, sorry ecosystem, screw you, like, goodbye, because you can't, you know, we've learned again and again that bringing in a new species to restore a habitat, and when you wildlife restoration, you study it. You think very carefully about it. You make sure you understand it. You have to have permits, right? All of these things. And every time we think, as humans, it'll be fine. Let's just bring in this cane toad to take care of the locusts. It's going to be fine. It ends up becoming an invasive species and completely taking over that ecosystem, right? And we have many examples here in the United States, whether we did it intentionally or not, right? Just through human movement, this happens a lot too. Zebra mussels, lionfish, bullfrogs, they're terrible.
Asian carp.
Red-eared sliders, please don't.
Even goldfish.
Please don't let your turtles out when you don't want them anymore. Here in California, many of our native turtles here in California are endangered because of people's red-eared sliders, like out competing them.
Horses.
What's that?
Horses.
Like
Argentinian
Mustangs.
ants.
I have a really cool story about that one in a second, though.
Yeah. Hold that thought.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, invasive species are actually the number 4 reason for biodiversity loss. So anytime you're going to introduce animals that haven't lived on this earth for millions and millions of years and throw them into an ecosystem, that ecosystem is screwed, right? So, but simultaneously, how do we know the animals that you're releasing in the ecosystem are going to do well themselves, right? They haven't been around, they haven't co-evolved with, you know, the various different plants and insects and other animals in this ecosystem. How do they know what's toxic? And we saw an example of that in the first Jurassic Park, which I actually really appreciated, right? That they were kind of tangentially addressing that problem.
With the West Indian lilac berries?
Yeah, right? And so it's a really bad idea. And this is something called de-extinction. So taking something back from extinction and you know, this is an active research line. People are trying to do it right now with the woolly mammoths. And, you know, things have grown and changed. Natural selection is always at work. And so you can't take something that existed so long ago and just throw it in there without it having devastating consequences for all involved. So I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry to tell you that your Jurassic Park is just really a bad idea for the animals in the park and for all the animals that live on the island where the park exists.
And people forget. They look at, there's a dinosaur or there is an animal, but entire ecosystems co-evolve. Okay, from viruses and bacteria in the soil all the way and up to things 99.9% of the stuff you don't even see.
Yes.
And so, but it's all impacted when you toss in something new.
It is a very intricate web. And I'm glad you brought up microbes too. Sorry, Gabe, and we'll
No,
get
no,
to
no.
your point. But I mean, think about this, right? When we go to a place as humans that we've never been and we drink the water and we get really sick from drinking that water because we're not used to those microbes, right, that live in the water. Could you imagine dinosaurs who haven't been around for, 300 million years or whatever it is? You just throw them there and it's like, okay, drink this water and eat these plants. Like the microbes alone would completely destroy them.
Yeah.
I'm convinced.
And then wait, but before
No,
we
go
get
ahead.
to your point,
Sorry.
one last thing.
It's all leading to a great point of story I'm going to tell, but go ahead.
Okay, perfect.
It's also, you also have to think about the social structure, and then like how much space do these, first of all, how much space do they need? Like what is going to be their home range? Can they survive in, one little bitty island, or is it going to be a thing where, like betta fish, when you put two betta fish in the same, it's head to head for the whole time. So the social hierarchy and like the social interactions between different animals is also really important to consider, and you don't know what those things are going to be until we put them out there.
Yeah, there's like a whole branch of science, like behavioral ecology, right, that studies this. I mean, it's very complex, and so, this would take decades and decades of research to be able to find out with all these social structures and all of those things, all of those factors to make it successful. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
no,
okay.
that's the thing
Okay.
is like, everything you've said is like, that's how crazy our natural world is, right? Like these complex webs where we have no real idea how deep these connections go. And that sometimes nature will surprise you with these kinds of relationships. So there's a paper coming out this weekend. So you're getting, this paper is talking about de-extinction in a weird way. So in the Mojave Desert, there are wild donkeys, right, that are feral, that have been re-released. During the Pleistocene, there was Smilodon and native horses in California, ancient native horses. Their interactions in the environment were essential to the growth of some plants, right? After wild horses and Smilodons, they disappeared here in California, some of those environments were really, really messed up. But we are now seeing, with the reintroduction of wild donkeys and mountain lions hunting those donkeys, in those areas, plant growth is actually much better than in some areas. So it's this return of this ancient, interaction between a predator and prey relationship that disappeared naturally from our planet, right, at the end of the Ice Age. But through human interaction, it's come back in a very, very unsuspecting way. And that is, again, I think it proves the point, though, that when we release something that isn't from that environment, we have no idea, really, how it will affect that environment. In this one very specific case, it was a strange quirk of nature, literally, that caused a benefit. But that could have gone in a whole other direction. And so, again, real life is stranger and more amazing than fiction.
Yeah, and think about how complex our bodies are, like the molecules that run our bodies to make a cell and tissue and organs. Now think about that complexity on an organismal level, on an individual level, then a population level, then an ecosystem level, right? Like it just gets more and more and more and more and more complex as you go out. So thinking that we understand it all and that we can actually, make these decisions is really just, again, hubris, human hubris, thinking, let's release that cane toad, let's release, right? And so we haven't gotten it right yet. So, there's still time. Maybe we will eventually, but
I think that's kind of the point that
Yep.
Crichton originally was making in Jurassic Park, was that it's our scientific hubris and not understanding what we know. It's trying to figure out, oh wow, there's a lot we don't know, and we really should figure that out before we start making these big jumps.
yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, we've really affected our environment so bad that there are so many projects out there where we are going out to try to correct those wrongs, but in many cases we push it too far. There's that where in the past we hunted sea otters along our coast so much that sea urchins have absolutely devastated our kelp forests, that we as humans have to physically go out there and get those urchins out just so that we don't lose kelp. But somehow, strangely too, it's like we keep pushing out sea otters from that. So it's this weird play that we're not getting for some reason.
Yeah, and I'm happy you bring that up because, okay, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, sorry guys, but conservation is sometimes a bit of a downer. We all know what a mass extinction is, right? The meteor, the dinosaurs. Well, we think we've had about 5 mass extinctions on planet Earth, and we're actually in our 6th mass extinction event right now. I'm sorry to tell you, we lose dozens of species to extinction every day.
Go
Some
humans!
some of which we predict that we haven't even found. So like we're losing them to extinction before we've even found them. And so, you're absolutely right in that we really have to be careful with how we do these things. And this is where de-extinction, it's very controversial in the scientific world, because we could be spending those resources, instead of trying to bring woolly mammoths back, right, or dinosaurs back, those resources to actually help the animals and the plants and the microbes, right, and the fungi that all live today and are very much balanced in their ecosystem today, and by changing our behavior, right? So, yeah, I am not pro de-extinction, as you can tell. I know there are others, it's controversial, that are, but I think we should try to save what we have now. Right?
And a lot of that is also because we don't fully understand our ecosystems all the way. So part of what I was looking at for my dissertation was what do lizards eat? Which sounds like a really basic question, sounds like something that you can just find on Google, but it actually gets a lot more complicated than that. And so it's like how can we introduce something new? How can we introduce dinosaurs to these ecosystems and predict what's going to happen when we introduce them, when we don't even fully understand how our ecosystems work? Like, we understand how they work, but there's just so many of these little intricacies that we don't fully know. All the way.
One of the things that is not dinosaur related, but they brought up in Dominion, were those giant locusts. And woo!
Team locust here in the front.
And one of the things with that is that there was an age of insects that where insects got really large. That's why you see like those giant dragonfly things in prehistoric stuff. But part of that was because the oxygen content of the atmosphere was so much greater that insects, they don't have lungs or respiratory system. They just take oxygen like directly in through little holes on their abdomens. So how do you think we could make giant locusts again in an environment that doesn't have what they would need?
Don't.
Well, the quick answer is you couldn't, because they would not have, they wouldn't be able to get the amount of oxygen that they need as soon as you release them. The time period that you mentioned, the Carboniferous, which was 60 to 70 million years before the earliest dinosaurs, had dragonflies with 18-inch wingspans. Woo! Yeah, they're bigger than a lot of songbirds. But the percentage of oxygen that was in the air at that time was much, much greater. And in fact, this is the time when that animal with the sail on its back that you see in the cave, Dimetrodon, lived. Not a dinosaur, okay? Dinosaurs didn't even exist at the time. But that animal also got rather large, as big as a crocodile. And some of those animals got large, we presume, because of that amount of oxygen. Could you raise them in a room where there's that much oxygen? Sure, but as soon as you let them out into nature, they wouldn't be able to pull it off. So.
Well, I mean, would it help if you lit them on fire too?
Yeah.
That was so weird in the
Fire always
movie.
helps.
Yeah.
It's like they were made of flammable components, especially like when Owen threw the spear at the Giganotosaurus and it blew fire out. I was like, how far did you genetically modify these things?
Real far.
Yeah.
They introduced DNA from dynamite.
Apparently. So.
Honestly, Stuart, when I saw the Dimetrodon, like there's so many sins I can forgive, but that was one of the times as a paleontologist I was like, and then also I watch with subtitles. And then literally they would say in the subtitles, dinosaur roar, and then it's a Dimetrodon, and I was like watching it, and I was like,
Dinosaur.
what?
That's one of the animals I dig up in my profession, and one of my missions in life is to let people know that Dimetrodon was not a dinosaur. It's actually a group called synapsids, which led to mammals like us. Mm-hmm. They're more closely related to you than dinosaurs are. Just saying. Just saying.
Lister stores were in the movie too, right?
Pardon me?
There were Lister stores, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
They have that. They did have that in the market scene.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
Okay.
We want to take questions?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. If you have any questions, please raise your hand, and we'll take one there with the sunglasses on your head. So the question was about the flora that would be needed for these dinosaurs from different periods, and what choices you'd have to make on bringing those back, and how do we even bring back extinct plants?
Well, okay, the beginning of the age of dinosaurs, no flowering plants.
Yes.
By the end of the age of dinosaurs, flowering plants. Very, very different. And so, and right down to the amount of roughage and so on and so forth. So the animals that you would find in the Triassic and early Jurassic are going to be eating completely different plants than would be the herbivores in the later Jurassic and Cretaceous. For example. And the bugs would be different. The fish would be different too. Yeah.
I mean, like, movie-wise explanation, like in the very first Jurassic Park, Dr. Ellie Sattler is like, this species of this plant shouldn't be here. It only existed. So I was assuming that they also somehow, science fiction magic, brought those plants back too. But like Stuart said, like, those plants, we have none of those at all. And then there's no way to find plant DNA. I mean, a lot of our plant fossils in paleobotany are mostly impressions. They're just the shape of it left behind in like these mud flats and limestones and things like that. So there's no chance of any kind of material. Maybe if a plant was stuck in amber, maybe we can find a chloroplast or something.
And then also plants can be sensitive to, temperature and climate. So if you're looking at something that's, high elevation and you're in a tropical rainforest, then that's not going to fly, and vice versa. So they're also temperature dependent and things like that, environmental factors that'll dictate the types of plants you can have on that island.
All right, we got another question. You in the Ahoy hat. Jack Horner's Chicken Source
So
project.
that is that's right along the lines of sort of the de-extinction, and I got to say, Jack is a really good paleontologist, but he's not a great geneticist. So I respect. He does great paleontology. Don't get me wrong, but I respectfully disagree with the strategy that he thinks he can revive a dinosaur out of a bird. For many of the reasons that we heard earlier.
I think there's a philosophical question in there too. Like, we are humans creating what we assume the image of a dinosaur is. They're modifying genes to put together something that we think looks like a dinosaur, right? We don't have that actual natural image, so there's a human bias to that project, in my own opinion. And so I think there's a philosophical thing there of like, what is a dinosaur, kind of? And so to work on that, I think, like, again, Dr. Jack Horner is amazing. He's done so many things for paleontology, but I do, again, think there's a bit of hubris in there to say that we can create a dino chicken based off of our own perceptions of what a dinosaur is.
That's kind of a really good point, getting back to the very first question in the panel of should we even be doing this? If we don't know what it should look like at the end, then maybe the answer is no. So we know what the actual puzzle looks like before we do those things.
All right, speaking of puzzles, we've gotten the time to start to wrap it up. So I want to just go down the line. Again, mention who you are, what institutions, organizations you represent, and maybe where people can find you online. So Gabriel?
Sure. So again, my name is Gabriel Santos. You can find me on most social media as @PaleoParadox. I work at the Alf Museum of Paleontology in Los Angeles, Claremont, California, and I am the co-founder of the Cosplay for Science initiative, all on the social medias. I'm on there constantly, and I'm putting pictures of my corgi, so.
All right, and I'm Earyn McGee. I'm a herpetologist. I teach people about lizards on social media, so you can find me at Afro, AFRO_herper, HERPER. And I teach people, I use Twitter and Instagram for the most part. So yeah, find me there.
And I'm Sam Wynns, conservation biologist with the National Park Service. You can find me at Steam Boss Sammy. That's Sammy with 2 M's and an IE. You can also find us in the flesh, in person. We're doing a huge STEAM fair at the Comic-Con Museum, and Cosplay for Science is there. So yeah, it's really fun. We're 16 if-then ambassadors flew in from all over the country. We're leading science experiments. We're doing cosplay contests. We're doing, what else are we doing? So much.
Yeah, there's
like a lot of different activities. So
Yeah.
like from
You're gonna learn to code from Girls Who Code.
yeah, yeah, it's a bunch of stuff.
STEM photo booth, like it's really fun.
Yeah.
So
You can
pop
try
by
a-
this weekend and see us 10 to 2 every day.
yeah,
at
there's like
Comic-Con.
video games and a pop-up museum about Star Wars natural history.
That's great.
Sweet.
Go ahead, Stuart.
So I'm Stuart Sumida, again, a professor of biology at one of your California state universities. Go California. The largest state university system in the world.
Go Titans.
1 in 20 degrees in America comes from the CSU.
Wow.
Okay, so support your public education.
And we have a completely separate California public university system too, so California's rocking it.
And shout out to the ALF. For those of you who've never been there, it's a great museum. It's a great little museum. It's not gigantic, but it really does its job really, really well. And I'm in November, I'll be joining the executive committee for a group called the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology. For those of you who are interested in paleontology, this is the largest group of paleontologists in the world, and we do have an education and outreach group, and we have a junior membership as well, so that anybody from age 5 and up can join the society, get all of our Twitter feed, get all of our Facebook feed, and access to all of our activities, including our meetings and our journals. So check us out at vertpaleo.org.
All right.
Hey, James, really quick, can I say one more thing really quick? So, okay, here's a cool thing. You may think you know what a paleontologist looks like, but you may not realize there's a ton of paleontologists in the audience right now. So if you ever are interested in learning about paleontology and talking with us, don't be afraid. We are regular people. Can you stand up, paleontologists? There's so many of you in the audience who I know.
Yeah, do it.
Stand up, paleontologists.
Myria,
Myra, where
Myria,
to go?
Get up,
Myra.
Myria.
Ashley, stand up.
All right, I'm James Floyd, and my social media Twitter is @JamesJawa. There's a little Star Wars thing in there, and then the podcast that I put together with my co-host Melissa is @Star Warsologies, or Star Warsologies with a space in it. We're doing another panel tomorrow called "The Mandalorian Beneath the Helmet." It's going to be in the room adjacent to us at 1 o'clock. Come check it out. We've got some cool people that can talk about some of the things that we see in The Mandalorian, from bounty hunting to making cool armor and some other sciences. So check that out tomorrow. We will be able to be out in the hallway to take more questions from you guys. We love talking to you. So thank you very much for being here. Again, I apologize for the computer system going down. I'll probably get spat on by a Dilophosaur when we get out there. But thank you so much for being here.
That wraps up this episode of Star Warsologies. We want to thank our Jurassic World guests, Dr. Stuart Sumida, Earyn McGee, Sam Wynns, and Gabriel Santos. And we want to thank all of you for coming to the panel or for listening to this podcast. If you have an idea for a topic for Star Warsologies or know an expert we should interview, let us know at starwarsologies@gmail.com or on Twitter and Instagram. That's StarWarsologies. Please also rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite service.
We are part of the Skywalking Network, where you can find a variety of other great shows about Star Wars, Disney, and Marvel, including the Max FX podcast, Resilience Squadron, Totally Tell Me Everything, and the flagship show, Skywalking Through Neverland. There's also a YouTube show, Today in Star Wars History. You can find all of these at skywalkingnetwork.com. We'll see you next time on Star Warsologies, when we discuss medicine in Star Wars with the co-hosts of Hi Everybody, a Bad Medicine podcast, which also put on a great show at Comic-Con.
Comic-Con!